Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about foods that aren't as healthy as you think. So the reason why I'm talking about this in the podcast episode today is because I had an amazing client reach out and they were like, listen, Andrew, I'm trying to make changes with what I'm eating and just trying to work on eating healthier. One of the things that I tell people is if you've never done anything to change your nutrition, it's really, the first part is really about cleaning up your diet. It's about moving away from processed foods. So I always tell people for the first week, just try to see what you can clean up from your diet. Hence why this conversation kind of started with my client. So I wanted to share this with you because there are a lot of things inside the grocery store that can really confuse people. And this is where my client came to me and he was like, listen, I'm seeing a bunch of stuff, low calorie, gluten-free, natural, organic, grass-fed, grain-fed. And he's like, I really don't know what is good and what is not good anymore. And I will say this right out the gate before I go into these foods. One, that is ridiculous. That we go to a grocery store and there is still confusion on what is healthy and what is not. Not because we don't have knowledge, but because we are basically trained from a lot of these food companies that everything is healthy. And the reality is not everything is healthy. As a matter of fact, a lot of the foods that we believe are healthy are actually just as inflammatory as some of the processed foods in the cold cuts in the kind of cold cut meat section that we see all the time. So it's really important that you understand what is going into you, that you understand why those things are not as healthy as you think that they are. So I just wrote a list of some of the main ones that I get questions on all the time. And then that way, of course, you can start to make better decisions. Ultimately with food, the objective with food is for you to have nutrient-dense foods, for you to have nutrient variety, so your body has all the raw building blocks it needs to make all the hormones and to keep your metabolism stable. Now, I know two things when I say this. Number one, I know that sometimes food accessibility can be a challenge. So what I mean by that is, depending on where you live, you may not have a lot of versatility. Like if you go to a local market or like a local grocery store and it's like a small mom and pop, kind of where I live in Simcoe, they are like, hey, here's this 6 vegetables that are in season. If you want the other 15 vegetables you typically eat, good luck. Like wait till they're in season. So I know that sometimes nutrient versatility is tough. I also know the second thing too is that everybody has a budget. And I totally respect that. So it's about looking at how do I maximize the budget? So how do I invest or spend the money in the foods that are actually going to help me? And what are some of the things where it's like, hey, you know what? Okay, maybe I'm okay taking this once a week, or maybe I'm okay having this in my routine, because it's all about balance. I don't expect someone to cut every single thing out of their diet, because the reality is you still should enjoy food. That being said, the list of stuff that my client sent to me, I was like, holy cow, this is crazy. So I want to talk about each and every one. I want to explain kind of everything from the label to like also why people think that they're really, really healthy, and then kind of go from there. So let's just dive right into this, okay? First one is cow's milk, okay? Milk is one of the biggest things that gets pushed on the North American diet all the time. Milk and dairy. To start, dairy is not bad. People are like, ooh, like dairy is super inflammatory. The dairy we eat now is inflammatory because it doesn't have what is called an A1 protein. So When your great great grandparents used to drink milk, that milk came from a cow that didn't have hormones and modified food, or what they call fortified or enriched food that the cow ate to produce milk or to produce larger volumes of milk. So in the olden days, when you drank milk, milk wasn't inflammatory because milk had something that was called an A1 protein. So it actually made the milk digestible for our stomach. Now you see people who have dairy issues, who have digestive issues, who get bloating, who get constipation, who get IBS from having dairy so much in their diet. Some people who even get ulcers. And it's because the milk that we have now lacks the A1 protein. So from a milk perspective, if you want to get calcium, if you want to get those types of nutrients and your vitamins, you should get them more from our lean meats more than from milk. Another thing too is like milk, truthfully, is not needed. As humans, we are the only mammal that drinks another mammal's milk. That's like not a thing for, like, think about this. If you like, you wouldn't have like a giraffe in the wild and it's like, I'm going to go and drink rhino's milk. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't even know if rhinos have milk, or giraffes for that matter. But it's like, we do not need the calcium or the fortification of nutrients after a certain point, which is why when babies are born, we of course nurse them, right? We feed them breast milk and then we transition them to real food because we no longer need those benefits. So really, milk is not something that you should feel like you have to buy. It's labeled as healthy all the time. It has labels on it that says high protein, high in nutrients. Yes, high protein and high in nutrients, but 9 times out of 10, if it's not digestible, if it doesn't have A1 protein in it, then you're just going to have digestive issues from it. So that's a big thing. Now, on the milk subject, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because there's a lot of milks out there. There's almond milks, there's oat milks. Again, those things are not real milk. They're modified. They have folic acid in them, and that basically is a chemical compound which like it causes almost like ADHD symptoms and side effects. These milks are basically designed for you to drink them. Just like oats are not regular things that you can milk, same thing with almonds. The majority of the time, if you look at an almond milk or an oat milk, the number one ingredient is not almonds or oats. It's like xanthan gum and it's fillers to make the material liquidy and milky and look white like milk. And then it has a small fraction of almonds. If you look at almonds and you were to grind them up, what you get is like a nut butter. What you get is a nut oil or a seed oil or a seed paste. You don't get a milk from it. So a lot of these things that we think are really great because they're like, oh, it's healthy. Almonds themselves are healthy. Yes, but almond in milk form, that's a science thing that we've created. And truthfully, it's not healthy. Same thing like oat milk. Okay. Now, gluten-free. Gluten-free snacks is this said to be super, super healthy. And we have, just like we have a demonization on dairy, we have a demonizing tendency to demonize gluten because people think that wheat is bad. So the idea with gluten is like when you remove the gluten out of a food product, you're basically taking away the ingredient that provides the like chewy texture almost in like breads, muffins, cakes, pasta. The gluten part of it also provides the flavor. People take out the gluten for gluten-free really because diet culture has put a bad thing on real wheat. Real wheat doesn't cause you digestive issues. Processed and refined wheat cause you digestive issues. So let's say you have a snack that's gluten-free. So you're like, okay, the gluten is out of it. It must be healthier. Well, here's the thing. To make up for the loss of flavor and texture that gluten actually provides, food manufacturers add in a lot of other fillers. So they'll add in sugars, they'll add in fats, they'll add in chemical additives because you want to basically re-enhance that flavor. And that's where the flavor, the density, and everything comes from. The gluten provides that. So, of course, I'll say if you're gluten intolerant, you shouldn't eat gluten containing foods. But here's the thing with that. If you were to look 30 to 40 years ago at your grandparents, 90% of them didn't have gluten issues. They didn't have digestive issues because there wasn't a bunch of chemicals in their routine. The majority of the time, people struggle with gluten and dairy digestive wise. And when I look at this, I'm picturing so many clients with this. They're like, well, first it was just really hard for me to eat a few things. And then gluten and dairy just really started to trigger. Your digestion is an indicator of how strong your metabolism is. So if your digestion is poor, gluten and dairy are really complicated and the most complex things to break down food-wise. Think of it like, if a protein nutrient has, 5 molecules, gluten and dairy has like 18 or 20. It's like 3 or 4 times harder and I'm making up the molecule number. So it's 3 to 4 times harder to break down and process gluten and dairy. So typically, if you have a gluten issue, it's not that you're allergic, because intolerant and allergic is different. Like allergies, you will die. Intolerant means that every time you eat it, it upsets your stomach and makes you feel sick. It's because your stomach is actually weaker. So like the majority of the clients that I look at from a digestive perspective, anytime someone's like, I have a hard time with gluten and dairy, I immediately start them on the process to start repairing their gut health, to start working on their digestion. Because if you can't absorb those things, then you're going to have a hard time digesting any other nutrients that goes in. So gluten-free snacks, are they healthy? Well, you can even look at something like low calorie. Low calorie or low fat goes under the same premise of gluten-free. They want to encourage you to buy the product by saying that something is zero because it's almost free to eat. Like if I have low fat, I can eat more of it. If there's low calorie, I can eat more of it. If it's gluten-free, I can have a larger portion. But every single time something is low, to make up for that low, we have to add in chemicals, additives, and fillers. So 9 times out of 10, the amount of sugar will be higher, the amount of salt will be higher, and the amount of preservatives will be higher. So even though the calories, the fat, or the gluten is lower, you're still going to have the potential of digestive issues, which is why I don't recommend picking up anything gluten-free, low fat or fat free, or low calorie. I think that stuff is BS. Just eat the real thing, eat it in smaller portions, and then just watch what you're eating portion wise. Next one that I got on here is smart cereals. Smart cereals is a new initiative because the cereal industry was dying. Because for the most part, and you can probably picture this as a kid, like I remember Fruit Loops, Cheerios, Tony the Tiger. Oh man, you remember Tony the Tiger? What was his oh great, right? Tony the Tiger. All of those things were designed to have kids eat essentially refined bread and sugar that was cheap to process and make. That's the stuff that you ate as a kid. Now, when we start to grow up and we're like, listen, I'm not a kid anymore. I don't eat cereal. Like I can actually have eggs. I can actually cook myself stuff. Then we start going away from cereals. So a large part of bringing back the cereal industry was trying to make things like vector or protein-based cereals, things that they put as smart cereals. And that's what they put there. What does the word smart in cereal even mean? It's nothing. It's a marketing tactic that's used to say, hey, here's a way you can justify the cereal. Here's a way you can justify the sugar or everything that you're eating. If we put a high amount of protein attached to all of the sugars and all the refinements. So that's a big thing, right? Now, there is, okay, something on smart cereals that's basically called like the yellow whole grain stamp. Okay. So like on average, like foods displaying this like yellow whole grain stamp or the smart stamp, the idea is basically like it is a stamp that the nutrition box says at the back that is like this is fortified. The words fortified, the words enriched, that just means that there's folic acid, that there's chemicals, and that just means that chemically we have altered it, which is going to make it harder for us to digest. Okay. When I take a look at all of the labels, and remember, when I'm building nutrition plans for people and I'm looking at how to change their food, I'm looking at everything. I'm making it as super simple and as realistic as possible. So I am looking at the grocery store. I am looking what's at the back. And when I read these labels, I see that they have 3 times the amount of sugar and they have at least twice the amount of calories than traditional whole grain foods that don't have that label. So instead of looking at the front of the box to make your selection of smart cereals, high protein, smart, whole grain, healthy, look at the back. Look at the back from a cereal perspective. If you want cereal, here's conditions from a cereal perspective. Fewer than 10 grams of sugar per serving, non-negotiable. At least 5 grams of fiber per serving. And we want to make sure that it contains bran in the ingredients. Because fiber and bran, that's the type of stuff that helps reduce cholesterol, helps regulate blood sugars. It contains beneficial antioxidants. And you want to make sure that it is natural fiber, because commercially produced fiber actually creates a resistance in your stomach. It creates a resistant starch, which means that it's hard for you to digest and it's actually hard for you to get rid of in your body. Now, the next one, my favorite, and this one is everyone's go-to. I admit it used to be my go-to until I started to recognize how I could get protein into my routine, and that is protein bars. I can tell you this. Protein bars are one of the most unhealthiest things. There are so many companies out there that want to sell you it's birthday cake flavor or it's this. At the end of the day, the easiest way to get protein is via your like actual protein portion in your meal. It's through your lean meats. It's through your high fat foods. You can even get protein in vegetables, right? Like 1.5 cups of broccoli, 8 grams of protein. When we get a protein bar, in order for the protein for the whey to last longer, we have to use preservatives. So there's only 2 preservatives that we know work in the world. It's sugar or it's salt. So many of the protein bars that I'm looking at the back of, they contain as much sugar as literally 3 or 4 candy bars, but they have like 2 grams of protein. And that's the crazy part. The majority of the protein bars that I see don't even have high protein. They're like 6 grams or 8 grams of protein, where it's like you could actually just get that from 2 eggs and save all of the stuff that's out there. So as a result, if you start taking protein bars, you're actually going to find, because of the sugar and the salt, you're going to develop cravings for sugar, cravings for salt, because sugar spikes your insulin and salt makes you feel thirsty. And another way that we determine our thirst is through our hunger signal. So when we get thirsty, we feel hungry, so that way we can try and get some hydration even from food. So most of the protein bars, they've got more than 4 ingredients. They're very low in protein. They have a high amount of sugar, and they have a high amount of salt. Now, let's say they don't have sugar or salt as their preservative. You're like, Andrew, I'm looking at a bar right now, and mine does not say sugar or salt. What I will tell you is this. There's absolutely sugar or salt in that bar. It's probably just called something different. And one of the things that I hate with nutrition labels is they use a million different words for the same thing. So what they will say is, this is sugar-free, sugar. But then in the ingredients, it will say sucralose, maltose, dextrose. Those are all byproducts of sugar. So it doesn't have to say the plain word sugar on the bar. There could be another form of sugar. So if there's long chemical names inside those ingredients and it's more than 2 or 3 grams, chances are it's a form of sugar. Now, let's say it doesn't have sugar. Then the only other way to preserve a protein bar or to preserve any type of dried food is with trans fats. And trans fats are a chemical fat that our body doesn't absorb, and it's really hard for us to digest. It's not good to consume a high amount of trans fats, which is why people should not be aiming for protein bars in their routine. If anything, you can get a protein whey supplement that's cleaner, that literally just has protein whey. It'll give you 30 to 40 grams of protein minus all the fillers and the garbage, and that's a lot easier. So like, for example, our supplement company, Clean Basics, we literally have just like a plain whey protein. Like you're not getting a flavor. It's just straight up whey and protein. You can mix it in water and you drink, and it's super simple. I'd rather somebody do that than someone go and, for example, have a protein bar that only gets 6 grams of protein and makes them very sugary afterwards. So I would completely avoid the protein bar section. Now, of all the things that we just already went through, the gluten-free snacks, the smart cereals, the protein bars, the dairy, what you will find with all of these things in a grocery store is they are sitting on the shelf. Anything that sits on the shelf that is not in the freezer is not perishable, which means that chemically it is going to be really hard for your body to digest. Now, I know you're like, well, Andrew, I buy a couple of things on the shelf. Of course, I'm not saying you're going to avoid everything on the shelf. What I'm saying is, if it comes in a box or a bag and has more than 4 ingredients, it's going to be harder for you to digest because chemically we have adjusted it so it can last longer. Real food expires very quickly. Real food digests very simply because our body doesn't see it as a foreign substance. That's why I wanted to kind of block those together. Now, we've only got a couple more in this because I want to keep this super, super potent before I share with you one of the live seminars that I've got coming up for January, because I'm so pumped for it. I want to talk about nut butters. Okay. Don't get me wrong. Nut butters are not all bad. Okay. Like a spoonful of peanut and almond butter, like it can be an easy way to add protein. It's a really great way of healthy fats into your day. One thing though with nut butters, like some nut butters, even though they're labeled as natural, they contain added sugars or trans fats. So a nut butter should have only one ingredient, whatever the nut is. That's why they're really expensive. So people who buy cheap nut butter, like who buy Jiffy or who buy like Nutella, where it's like or it says 10% hazelnuts and the rest is all the additives. The reason why nut butters tend to be more expensive is because true pure nut butter is just the nut that has been crunched down and allowed to sit with the oils that happen from the crunch. That's it. The oil film at the top is the healthy fats, and all of the nut bits, whether you do crunchy or you have it as a smooth, like that is good quality nut butter. If you're not buying good quality nut butter or nut butter that has a ton of ingredients, then typically the other ingredients are trans fats, it's sugars, and those trans fats and the sugars are going to increase your bad cholesterol. That's a big thing. So the only ingredient needs to be nuts. That's it. And the crazy part about it is literally like that should be one of the simplest things for you to pick in your routine. Is just you can either have it holy cow. What am I looking for? Not packaged. Pressed. There we go. Okay. You can either press it yourself, you could buy it pressed. Regardless of what it is, it will say that the single ingredient is nuts. Okay. That goes typically with any butter, by the way. You should just have a single ingredient because butter is not complicated, realistically. Okay. Um, the final thing that I want to share with this is from a health food perspective, there are 3 different labels that most people have a confusion over: the label of organic, the label of natural, and the label of free range. Whenever you're buying any types of meats or any healthy food, organic, natural, and free range are different. Let me explain to you. Free range is mostly on meat. What that means is whatever animal that was butchered or prepped or put in that thing was given a minimum space in which they were allowed to move. It doesn't mean that they don't eat fortified diets. It doesn't mean that they don't have chemicals in their food. It also doesn't mean that that possible chicken or piece of meat was raised on a balanced diet. Okay. The reason why free range exists is there was a rule and a regulation placed in farming that, like, you could not stress out an animal before butchering it because it actually does make the meat go bad and it actually chemically changes the meat. Plus, it's animal cruelty. Like, it's not wrong to literally push, or it's not right, sorry, to push every single animal together and they're not living a good quality life before they make it to our table. So the rule came in that there had to be a minimum set distance between each one. For chickens, the example of free range in a chicken is literally each chicken gets like 5 feet by 5 feet if they're lucky. It really doesn't change anything else. So sometimes you will see that free range is more expensive when that's just a marketing ploy and a marketing tactic. The majority of meats that you will see have to be free range because of law. Now, another thing with free range is people assume, well, if the animal has more space to range, then they can naturally graze on more things like grass and more natural foods. Also not true. There are a ton of places that do free range, but they're in barns or they're in facilities. So free range is not something that I care about when I'm looking. I more care about organic, which is the one that I want to talk about now. Organic effectively means from a package perspective that there has been a certain diet or the thing that has been put into that package, whether it's a meat or a food product, literally has like no chemical process, and it's been done in a way where effectively they've been so for example, for meats, they've been fed a grass-fed diet, which hence some of the things are some of the labels you'll find with them tend to be organic grass-fed together. That's totally fine. They've been fed a grass-fed diet. They don't have any added hormones or any chemicals that are in there, and it's stable. Okay. The word natural comes up a lot. This is the third one. From a natural perspective, what is natural? Natural flavors. Most people would assume that the word natural, especially in food, means that it is exactly as it was grown. It is natural. The reality is, though, is that natural flavors or natural on there can also be a chemical process. So what I mean by that is if something, for example, says with natural flavors. I watched an amazing, it's a phenomenal, oh shoot, I forget the documentary name. Anyways, as well as reading a couple papers, it's what inspired me to watch the documentary, because I read a few papers on this. So they have natural farms, and basically something like an orange, for example, let's say they want to add in the natural flavor of an orange. They will take an orange, They will extract the flavor from the peel. They will do tests on it to make the chemical sweeter, to make it taste the best, for it to have the best orange it is. They intertwine it with other natural flavors, and then they add natural flavors onto whatever that food is. So natural flavors is not natural. All it means is that whatever flavoring was used came from a natural place, but it could also have artificial stuff in it. So you're probably listening to all this right now, and you're like, fuck this. This is dumb. This is crazy. I should be able to just go to the grocery store. I should be able to go to a shelf, pick up a piece of food, not have to look for all this crap, and know that my food is not actively trying to kill me. And that's the truth. We don't really take into account our food quality, but I really think that we should, because everyone has the right to eat clean food. I also think as well, too, from a digestive perspective, we are causing a lot of issues. Kids are starting to be born with digestive issues. Like, could you imagine being born and being gluten intolerant? Because inflammation passes on from person to person if we're not careful. Food quality is a big, big challenge. And I think every single person, at least every person I've come up and come across as a client, they want to genuinely eat healthy. Nobody wants to eat crap every single day, but also when it's really complicated to eat healthy, or when these foods are priced in a way that it doesn't make sense for us to eat healthy, then we start opting for poor choices. So for me, when I'm looking in my grocery store, when I'm looking to shop for food, I'm trying to make the best decision possible, because I know that it affects my kids. I know that it affects my future. I know that it could affect the way that I age long term. But also, I'm looking to find ways to promote the people who are doing things in an organic way. So I will say this, and I've said this before, and I catch fire for this all the time. Like, find a local butcher. See if you can find a local meat program. And local butchers, 9 times out of 10, have a connection to someone in which you can be a part of a local meat program. This is where everyone might go on a cow together. You're paying for your meat up front, but it's saving hundreds of dollars week over week, because it's all in one place. So you're buying in bulk, and also you know how that calf is raised, you know what they're eating, and you know what goes into your food. I try my utmost to not buy anything that has a label. If it has to have a label on it, a nutritional label, chances are it's not great. So what does that mean? If you go into the grocery store, shop the outer perimeter. It's what I tell all of our clients to do. The outer perimeter has all the fruits and vegetables that you will need. The outer perimeter has the meats, and the outer perimeter has the produce. And then also it has cold storage for stuff that's not going to last. So, you know, the bread that you see in the freezer, the good bread where you're like, why is this bread in the freezer versus the one that's on the shelf? That's the one that doesn't last. That's the one that's actual real wheat and real gluten that is not going to have a lot of ingredients in it. By shopping the outer perimeter, the fruits and vegetables that I pick up, I try to buy local, again, to support, of course, the local markets that I have here. If you don't have a local market, I mean, places like Sobeys and Costco, they're really solid, at least in my area, because they do work with local markets. They try to get local food in. Like, there's a reason why when you buy a pepper, like, it doesn't have an ingredients label. Like, it should just be a pepper straight up. Like, that's as simple that food should be. You should be able to look at it with your eyes and go, got it. I know what's in here. So I always recommend that people shop the outer perimeter. The only thing that I personally go into the aisles for is spices. So pepper, salt, turmeric, cumin, cardamom powder, that type of stuff. Or like certain baking ingredients, for example, like yeast. Obviously, that stuff is going to be there. Otherwise, everything else that I have, like nut butters, at least where I am, is actually in the frozen section, and it's got just this the single ingredient that's in the freezer. So if you work on just even removing one or two of these things that I went through, like you're listening and you're visualizing your diets now, just like my clients do. And I'm like, hey, just look at what you're eating currently. Remove just one or two of those things. Do it for a month. See the difference in how you feel. Watch for the changes in your digestion, in your metabolism, how frequent you go to the washroom, whether or not you have any cravings for sugar or salt. Watch those things because those are large indicators as to how your digestion is performing. So I wanted to say this to you guys and gals, not to, of course, scare you from these things, because again, I'm a human being. Like if I'm at somebody's house and I'm over for breakfast and they're like, hey, here's this nut butter, I'm not going to go, oh, the label for, no, it's about doing 90% good. So the 10% when you're out, when you're at a restaurant, when you're with friends, family, you can just live your life. Okay. That's the whole purpose of this, right? So, hope you got a lot of great value out of this. Before we end the podcast, I want to talk to you guys about this amazing seminar that I have coming up on January 31st. So, it is how to lose your first 10 pounds naturally. I'm really pumped to bring this up. This was actually a seminar that I did last year at the beginning of last year. I think I did it in February instead of January, because a lot of people struggle often with their first 10 pounds, and losing the first 10 pounds is super simple because it involves literally making just small tweaks like the stuff that I just talked about. Cutting a couple of things out of your diet, making sure that your hunger and fullness is good, making sure that you have a stable metabolism. So that means spacing your meals. So a lot of people get stuck on the first 10 pounds of weight because they lose it, gain it again, lose it back, gain it again, lose it. But then there's like cravings or there's a struggle with energy. And that process, that cycle of constantly doing that, that's not something you have to experience. So it is very, very simple to do, and I want to show everyone how to do it. It's not just going to be a seminar on knowledge on telling you, of course, why you're regaining the 10 pounds, because that is a part of it, but it's also going to be like the actionables, like do X, Y, Z today, so that way literally in 3 weeks you will be down 10 pounds down. That is the entire objective of the seminar. So again, it is how to lose 10 pounds, your first 10 pounds naturally. I'm going to put the link to this in the show notes for it. And the sign up date, we're going to be hosting it January 31st. It's going to be in the evening, 6 p.m. EST. I'm going to be talking more about it on my socials. But if you're just listening to the podcast, what you can do is basically you can click the show notes, and then there's going to be a link there for it. You can register for the seminar. I encourage everyone to hop on live, because live is where you can get personal questions asked and answered, and like literally get actionables right there. I'm all about making sure that like people feel confident with the material. Either way, if you're like, hey, look, I can't make that date, but it's like I would still love the recording. Cool, amazing. Then you can just register for it, and I'll send you the recording afterwards. So yeah, I'm super, super pumped on that. But it is all about making sure that we're doing easy, actionable steps every day. Weight loss doesn't have to be hard. Metabolism doesn't have to be a struggle. Food doesn't have to be a struggle. It's all about informing yourself, because again, you want to eat healthy. 90% of people want to eat healthy. They want to have high energy. They want to feel great. They want to have stable weight. It's just a matter of how and what you need to do. So that is all for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Coach Andrew out, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye. Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site? We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.